Welcome back. In today's topic, I will show you the gender in Italian. How to determine the gender. If you didn't know, in Italian nouns, all the nouns, they have a gender. Not just the nouns that describe people, but also the nouns that describe objects, they have a gender. And for some of you, this might sound strange, but it's very common in many languages. In Slavic languages, we have gender. In Romance language, we have gender. If you speak any Romance or Slavic language, you probably already know about this. In Slavic languages, for example, usually we have three genders. And in German also we have three genders. We have masculine, feminine, and neuter. But in Latin-based languages, we call them Romance languages, such as French, Spanish, Portuguese, Italian. We have two genders, masculine and feminine. And so how can we know the gender of a word? What does it mean, gender? Well, this is something about, like most of the time, you have to learn it by heart. So when you learn a new word, you need to also remember the gender of that word. But luckily, in Italian, we have an easy way to guess the gender of the word. I'm not telling this works for all of the cases, like 100% of the time, but it works most of the time. So the rule is that if a word, if a noun, we're talking about nouns here, if a noun ends with the letter O, it's probably 99%, it's probably a masculine noun. For example, I show you here some words. For example, the word fratello. The first word is fratello. Fratello means brother, and it ends with the letter O. It describes a man, so that's why brother, fratello, O. It describes a person, a human being, and it also describes a man. That's why it's natural to guess, yeah, it's masculine word. But I will show you other words. For example, the next word is gatto. Gatto means cat. It also ends with letter O. That's why it's also masculine. But you can say, but wait a second, cat is not a person. How can it be masculine? Okay, maybe you can say it's like they can be male and female cats, but it's not about that. In Italian, it doesn't matter. It's people, animals, or objects. All the nouns, they have a gender. And if the word ends with letter O, it's masculine. So also another word is tavolo. Tavolo means table. Tavolo, it's also masculine. It ends with O. And next word is giorno. Giorno. Giorno means day, and it's also masculine because it ends with letter O. Giorno. And this letter combination, do you remember? G-I-O from the lesson on about pronunciation. So that's why it's pronounced as giorno. Okay, so letter O, if a noun ends with letter O, it means it's masculine. But what about feminine? Okay, we have also easy method to guess the feminine nouns. So the feminine nouns usually end with letter A. For example, I wrote other words here that end with letter A. So for example, let's look at here. Sorella. Sorella. Sorella means sister. It's feminine. Casa. Casa. Not casa. We say casa. So letter S is pronounced like Z between two vowels. Remember from the pronunciation lesson? We discussed about it. So casa means house. It's also feminine. Macchina. Macchina. Macchina means car, and it's also feminine word. And penna. Penna. Penna means pen, and since it ends with letter A, it's also a feminine word. And also another detail, in Italian, you have to emphasize the double letters. So don't pronounce it as pena. No, it should be penna. If you see a double consonant, you have to highlight it. You have to pronounce it strongly and highlight it. It's a double letter. So not pena, it's penna. Penna means pen. And let's continue. But there will be also some nouns that end with letter E. What about then? Then there is no rule actually to guess the gender. So if a noun ends with O, it's probably masculine. If a noun ends with A, it's probably feminine. But if a noun ends with letter E, it can be masculine or feminine. You just have to memorize it when you learn the word. You have to memorize, you have to remember the gender of the word. For example, here I wrote some masculine and feminine nouns that end with letter E. Let's take a look. So the first word is padre. Padre means father, and it describes a man, so that's why, of course, it's a masculine word, padre. And padre ends with letter E. And if I didn't know that the meaning of this word, that it means father, it describes a man, or if I didn't know that it's masculine word, then there is no way for me to guess the gender of this word, okay? Because it could be feminine also. If a word ends with E, that word can be feminine or masculine. We need to remember, we need to memorize the gender. So padre is masculine word that ends with E. Another masculine word is the word cane. Cane means dog. And cane also ends with letter E. But if I didn't know that it's, you cannot just guess it, because you cannot say, oh, cane is masculine because it ends with E. No, there's no such rule. Because the words that end with E can be masculine or feminine. That's why you have to memorize and remember the gender of the words that end with E. And two feminine words that end with E, let me show you. Madre, which means mother, and nave, which means ship. Okay, so these words also end with E, but they are feminine. Okay, that's the basic rules about the gender. Just when you see a word that ends with O, it's probably like 99% of the time, it's probably a masculine word. I'm not telling always, there are some exceptions. There are some words that end with O, but they are feminine, and but there are very few of them. And if the noun ends with letter A, it's probably feminine, like 99% of the time. Also, here also there might be some exceptions. For example, some words that end with A, but they are not feminine, they are masculine, but they are very rare. And finally, if the noun ends with letter E, then you just have to memorize the gender. Okay, that's everything that I want to tell you about the gender of the nouns. Okay, then we will, in the next lessons, we will see